So now we're going to talk about The Dark Knight, and this is where Joker is introduced. And Batman, Harvey Dent, and Commissioner Gordon have to stop him, like in Batman The Long Halloween.
When you first said The Dark Knight, I thought you were just going to start reviewing an evening that seemed especially dark to you, but it makes a lot more sense now in context of, what we're talking about. I thought it was a pretty good little flick. It was enjoyable.
I think The Dark Knight is one of the best sequels ever made and one of the best comic book films ever made. This film is fantastic.
Wait, you liked it better than Ang Lee's Hulk?
Well, yeah, I guess so. Our next discussion is going to break away from the good bad template because I don't know. There's just more to take away from this film. Really, the only issue I had with it was the first act, that it's in comparison with the second and third acts, it's definitely the weakest. And it's the one where Joker doesn't really come into the foreground yet. But as soon as that second act starts, the film just goes uphill from there. Let's talk about Batman in this movie. And it's weird because he feels like the co-star of his own film. Like, the Joker and Harvey Dent feel more like main characters than him.
Sometimes, for sure. I think, especially the dynamic between the Joker and Batman, I think that it's quite intentional. There's really meant to be an equivocation there. Like, there is a moment when Batman is very much in the balance about his own identity because of the head games that the Joker's playing with him.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they really nailed that relationship between Batman and the Joker in this film. Like the ending where the Joker's like, this is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Because the Joker and Batman, neither one of them is going to give in. They're just going to keep at it all the time.
Yeah. Unless the Joker gets the jump on him with a pencil.
How about a magic trick? I'm gonna make this pencil disappear. Ta-da! It's gone.
But what was interesting about Batman in this movie is that he actually doesn't want to be Batman anymore. Because he wants to live with Rachel. And I thought that was interesting because usually when Batman is portrayed, he's just kind of like, oh, I work alone. That kind of character. But here, he wants something more than just Batman. And that's why he sees Harvey Dent and he says, hey, that could replace Batman. Because he's impressed by Dent's idealism in this movie. And speaking of Dent, he does seem like one of the strongest main characters of the movie for sure. And I think he has the biggest arc because he starts out as kind of like this guy with idealist values that wants to fix the city in a legal manner. Mm-hmm. But over time, Joker makes him realize that, or Joker makes him question one of the themes of the movie, actually. And that's, in order to stop evil, does good actually have to become a bit evil itself? And there's the scene where Harvey Dent is talking to Commissioner Gordon and saying how he's investigated a lot of Gordon's officers.
Gordon, I don't like that you've got your own special unit, and I don't like that it's full of cops I investigated at Internal Affairs.
If I didn't work with cops you'd investigated while you were making your name at IA, I'd be working alone. I don't get political points for being an idealist. I have to do the best I can with what I have.
And it just seems like Dent is kind of not getting the actual picture of what Gordon and his men have to go through and what's going on there. Mm-hmm. But then as soon as Rachel is threatened, he puts a gun in someone's face. And yeah, it's just one of those things pointing out that you can have these stronger beliefs, but it ultimately goes down to what you're going to act on. Are you going to act on what you say, or are you going to throw that away once you're threatened? So I thought that was interesting about his character. His relationship with Maggie Gyllenhaal I thought was really good. Also, something I found interesting is how they revealed his villain name. Usually when you're doing a comic book film and you're kind of adapting this comic booky name like Two-Face, it can come off a bit cheesy if you don't do it right. But this film does it right. And I like that he actually got that name before he was actually Two-Face, before he lost half of his face.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a representation of what he looks like. It was a representation of how other people saw him. The action sequences are also very improved from the last time. For one, Batman's fist fights with people have longer takes and you can see what's going on.
Yeah. It was a more cinematic fighting style for sure.
One of my favorite scenes in the entire film is the tunnel chase with Harvey Dent inside the SWAT van. Joker's coming in with the semi-truck. And then Batman, in that one shot, comes in the middle of them and the bazooka hits his vehicle. And then he continues on with the Bat bike, which actually steals that scene. Like, you hear when people talk about movies, like, oh, he stole the movie. The Bat bike in this movie is the non-actor that actually steals the movie for me, because that was really cool. I also like how in that chase, there's no music. It's just highway noise or tunnel noise.
Yeah. That was an interesting sound editing choice, because almost always in a fight scene, you've got some sort of suspenseful or frenetic music going on underneath it to enhance.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that, which says, one, it says there's some phenomenally good sound editing going on to begin with, but it also says that they feel like the sequencing can stand on its own without the addition of music. So
yeah. Now let's talk about the Joker. And there's a lot to say about this character. The obvious thing to say is that Heath Ledger was excellent as Joker. He knocked it out of the park so hard. Whenever there's a new Joker, it's always compared to him.
when Jack Nicholson did the original Joker back in the very first Batman movie, people thought he would never be topped in that movie.
But he was.
And whether he was topped or not, definitely, like, people were a little concerned, like, how's Heath Ledger going to stand in the? And it's like, you know what? There were no footsteps to stand in. You got it. So,
and it was pretty weird too, because at the time Heath Ledger was just known for his rom-com roles. 10 Things I Hate About You being one of the examples.
He had already done Brokeback Mountain at that point. So,
well, okay.
Yeah. But
still, that's a way different role from being the Joker.
And unfortunately for him, he was also doing a whole lot of really dark parts at that time. And I think that took a toll on him psychologically too, and made it a lot harder for him to, whatever his struggles were. You may not want to put this in your review, I don't know, but I really do think that, the fact that he was doing all these incredibly dark roles made it really hard for him, because he does, as a method actor, get very immersed into his character. And I think that made it really hard for him to just function at that point. And I think that contributed to what happened to him.
Yeah.
So, and I don't blame the studios or any of that. I mean, he took the roles on knowing what he was getting into, but, I think, now that we know what we know, maybe it would have been wise for him to not choose one of those roles he was working on at the time. Like, maybe he could have given up the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, or, one of those other ones. But,
yeah. Also, one thing that his character demonstrates, and he kind of breaks a film rule in this movie, because usually the rule is you show, you don't tell. But there's this one scene where Joker has someone with a knife at the mouth, and he's telling him this fake story, because he changes it later, about how his dad was being abusive and supposedly cut his mouth open with a kitchen knife.
So, he comes at me with the knife. Why so serious? He sticks the blade in my mouth. Let's put a smile on that face.
that was pretty disturbing. And you don't see any of it. It's just him talking. And it just goes again to how good Heath Ledger is in The Dark Knight, because he just made it feel real with his words to the point where you don't have to see it. Another example of showing, not telling, a big one is Seven and Saw. Like the Saw films, they are really over the top with their violence to the point where I would watch scenes and I was just thinking, yeah, this is a movie. This is fake. And it just pulled me out of these moments.
Because you saw too much?
Because I saw too much, yeah. But Seven, it understands how the human brain works. It understands that no matter how graphic a scene may be in a movie, it's never going to top what the audience can imagine. And that's why the ending of that movie is so horrifying, because you just get the implication of what happened, but you don't actually see what happened. This just goes to show that these film rules that are out there, some of them should be kept, but if you break it in just the right way, it can be amazing.
Well, like I always say, they're tools, not rules. So,
yeah, you got it. And the second story that the Joker tells is basically where he says that he cut his own mouth open after his wife got mutilated by the mob. But I saw this theory online where there's actually kind of a third story within the movie. And that's that he had a military background. What do you think about that?
it's an interesting theory. And when I saw that, the connection I made was almost like there was a suggestion, like a reference almost to the character of the Joker in what's that movie? I'm trying to remember. I guess maybe it's not a good comparison if I can't remember the name of the movie. Full Metal Jacket. There was a character in there that was the Joker.
Yeah.
A little over the top, obviously not, and he wasn't a villain. But
And it's not just the parts where he uses a gun well. There's also these small moments that kind of make you think about that after you hear that. After I heard that theory online, I was kind of thinking about it. The part in the interrogation scene where he's telling Batman that after the police is done with him, they're just going to cast him out like a leper. And that could go back to maybe the Joker was injured in a battle and they just kind of sent him away because he wasn't good for them anymore. Also the part where he's talking to Dent.
Nobody panics when things go according to plan, even if the plan is horrifying. If tomorrow I tell the press that like a gangbanger will get shot, or a truckload of soldiers will be blown up, nobody panics, because it's all part of the plan.
I wonder if he was actually blown up in that van of soldiers.
maybe. Good theory.
But anyway, that's just theories. So yeah, a pretty scary villain for this movie, but also kind of funny.
Let's wind the clocks back a year. These cops and lawyers wouldn't dare cross any of you. I mean, what happened? Your balls drop off?
Harvey Dent never made it home.
Of course not.
What have you done with him?
Me? I was right here. Who did you leave him with?
But he's also a villain that makes sense. There's a lot of things he says in here that make a lot of sense. Like the scene where he tells that one police officer,
Do you want to know why I use a knife?
and he's saying how in their last moments, people will show you who they really are. So yeah, that's just how you make a great villain. One that he just always seems like he's ahead of Batman. and Harvey Dent and Commissioner Gordon. He said he feels like he's ahead of everyone in this movie, and that's how you make a great villain. Also, that he pushes everyone's buttons.
Does it depress you, Commissioner, to know just how alone you really are? Does it make you feel responsible for Harvey Dent's current predicament? Where is he? So, in a way, I knew your friends better than you ever did. Would you like to know which of them were cowards?
On his way to Tony Stark's lab.
He pushes everyone's buttons when he says that one guy on TV has to be killed within an hour, or he's going to blow up a hospital. And you see that one cop in the van ready to shoot this guy because his wife is in the hospital.
Yep.
I also like how he says, how when he's talking to Harvey Dent, he's like, do I look like a guy with a plan? Yeah. Like having this one guy in a prison cell have a cell phone stuck in him. The whole thing, getting these people on these two boats that he would later use. No, I guess he doesn't have a plan. It's just funny when he says that, because he clearly plans all this stuff out. Speaking of which, you get to the final thing that he does in this movie. And this thing is the best Saw movie I've seen. Like this movie, like what this scene in the movie could almost be a Saw movie. And that's the two boats, where each boat is given a detonator. Each boat has explosives for the other boat's detonator. And Joker says, one of you has to blow the other up, or I'm going to blow them both up at midnight. You can also kind of see both sides of that. Because, like, you understand how the passengers are like, well, why do we deserve to die? These people decided to be monsters. Like, they made their choice. But then you immediately think, well, what if I was in the other boat with the prisoners and I kind of reflected on the stuff I did? I came to terms with it and I buried that previous side of me. So you can, it's a complex idea for a superhero movie. That's something that this movie does really well, that it has these deeper themes to it in a place where you wouldn't really expect them to be. And that last scene just gives me chills.
He didn't do anything wrong.
Because he's the hero Gotham deserves, but not the one it needs right now. So we'll hunt him. Because he can take it. Because he's not our hero. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector, a dark knight.
Like I said, this film is fantastic. I'm going to give The Dark Knight an A.